Can we talk about George Pickens here? He had 103 targets, 59 receptions, 900 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Missed a couple games, didn't play a full season, but that's okay. A 57% catch rate. What does reception perception tell us about what George Pickens might bring to the table?
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
May be the greatest catch I've ever seen.
It's interesting because I started the profile off, saying that George Pickens has only been in our lives for 3 NFL seasons, and yet he's had such a weird and winding kind of journey, and he's such he's such a kind of a bit of an odd player that it feels like it's actually been longer.
Way longer.
But
yeah,
we've talked about this before, that he's been playing for the Steelers team that is dead last in passing touchdowns since he arrived in the NFL. It's just been this awful passing environment. He started his career playing in Matt Canada's high school offense, and then he plays for an Arthur Smith team last year that's much more buttoned up, but still it was obviously not a very good offense, not very good quarterback play, and he actually was a bit of an odd fit as Arthur Smith's ex-receiver, but I think he's going to be a great fit as the Cowboys ex-receiver. And I got to say, after charting him out for reception perception, I'm really, really bullish on how this is going to go for Dallas. Obviously, pending Pickens's, just his mental state, like where he's at. Is he fully locked in? I think he's going to be locked in, right? Because he's got to be. This is the best offensive environment he's played with. It played in ever. It's the best quarterback he's played with by like a country freaking mile, bro. This is a team in Dallas that in 2023 was 6th in success rate and was 8th in explosive play rate. Like, they were one of the best offenses in the league, 2nd in EPA per play in the 2023 season when Dak Prescott was healthy, when CeeDee Lamb was dynamic. And that was without like another dynamic presence on the outside. You're adding Pickens into the mix here. And from a reception perception standpoint, you think about just where he's going to play. Last season in Pittsburgh, he took 79.6% of his sampled snaps outside in 2023. And then last year, that actually went up by just a little bit, 79.9%. He was on the line of scrimmage for 81.9% in 2023, 81.4% last season. So, like, I expect those numbers to hold, maybe even go up in Dallas, because CeeDee Lamb moves around the formation so much. They really need that like true X receiver. And Pickens can do that. And last season, like you and I were talking about this at the beginning of the year, I thought he was playing the best football of his career by a lot, like by far, not even close, the best football of his career last season to start the year. And it didn't hold over the full course of the season, like, because he had, ironically, had that weird game where he was just not fully engaged, not playing a full load of snaps against the Dallas Cowboys, who he currently plays for. But still, over the course of the season, 74th percentile success rate versus man coverage, career best mark there. 83rd percentile success rate versus press, career best mark there. And big improvements on routes like the slant route, where he actually had issues separating consistently on slants at the start of his career. Last year, 82.4% success rate on slants. Actually ran them at a pretty low volume, 13.9%. I think that could actually go up because Dak Prescott in 2023 led all quarterbacks on yards throwing to slants and shallow crossing routes according to Fantasy Points data. So I just love this fit. I love that Pickens is coming off easily the best year of his career, even if it wasn't a consistent full season. I that's obviously, again, something we can unpack here, but really like the way that his reception perception profile looks coming out of this year.
And again, I think this is kind of where reception perception really separates itself, I think, from box score watchers or guys who might be influenced by fantasy football, right? I mean, we're talking, Matt is coming out here and telling the folks, this was the best year of George Pickens' career. He had 900 yards. The year prior to that, he had 1140, right? He had more touchdowns. He had a higher yards per reception, right? There was just more to be had right there. He had a better catch rate in 2023 versus 2024. But Matt is sitting here telling you this guy had the best year of his career. And I think a lot of that, and Matt, tell me if I'm wrong here, his improvements on the slant were significant, I thought his improvements against man coverage was significant, and his improvement against press coverage was significant as well. There was just a lot of things from a real football standpoint that George Pickens really elevated his game in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're going to be a high-end X receiver in the league, it is a non-negotiable that you have to be good against press coverage.
Exactly.
Period. Like you have to be. And to Pickens' credit, you look at his early career reception perception data where coming out of his rookie season, you and I were noting that, like, man, his success rate versus zone coverage was sub 70% as a rookie. His success rate versus man was below average. Those are concerning marks. You know, you could also say, of course, like, and we noted this, that he was coming off of his last season in college, torn ACL. He was still kind of coming back from that. He's obviously playing in that goofy Matt Canada offense that was just having him run a bunch of deep routes. So that depresses the overall success rate. No question about that.
Right.
But even in that kind of volatile year one profile, he still was 72.4% success rate versus press. Like, he's always been good against press coverage. And now he's just gotten better and better. And I mean, so he goes from 72.4 as a rookie, 73.9 in year 2. And then last year at 77.6%, like I said, 83rd percentile in reception perception history. That's really what we're talking about here. And just looking at like his overall metrics, again, the success rate versus man coverage, he clears 70% for the first time in his career.
That was
like,
huge.
he's really, that's huge. That's big, because now we're talking about, like, you could be like a sub 70% player and you can be a starting NFL X receiver, but like being a big time target earner or whatever you want to say, like that real true difference maker at X, being 70-70 against man coverage and press coverage. Again, that's really, we're talking about some of the better players here. I actually look back funny enough at Michael Gallup's 2020 season with the Dallas Cowboys. He was 72% against man coverage, 70.6 against zone, and 75.5 against press. Like, Pickens's numbers were better than that across the board last year. And I think like that's sort of the baseline that we're looking at here. Like, if Michael Gallup can have that success as the team's X receiver, and I liked Michael Gallup as a player. I was a big Michael Gallup fan in his prime.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
But like, Pickens could be a better, I think, more fluid version of that. And really it is the improvements on routes like slants and some of those like post routes as well. His curl route success rate was right in like the average type range this year. And I thought he got better and better over the course of the year. That's going to be critical in Dallas because Dak loves to throw those stop routes.
Loves it.
What I mean by that is it like it looks like it's going to be a go route, and then he just literally stops, turns back. It's a curl route against man coverage. That's going to be like a man beating route for the Cowboys. And, you know, look, if like CeeDee Lamb is double covered, or, you know, there's a lot of just like traffic around him in the middle of the field and like that throw's not open, Pickens is going to be available. And I think Dak's going to be taking a lot of those throws this year.
So again, I want to highlight some of his man coverage scores here. So last year he was pushing 73% success rate against man coverage. In 2023, he was at 68.7%, so sub 70. And again, if you're new here, maybe you've just discovered our podcast, you've just discovered this product called Reception Perception. Let's set some benchmarks here, right? So man coverage, you want to get to 70%. Zone coverage, you want to get to 80%. Press coverage, you want to be at around 75%. If you want to be considered a good player. If you want to be considered a good player in the NFL, you got to be 70, 80, and 75 against press. Now, again, it's kind of like a little bit of bias here, right? Because we're talking about just the good players, right? But when we're talking about George Pickens, we're saying, okay, for him to be a good player, he needs to clear some of these benchmarks. Last year, he cleared that benchmark. It's a pivotal role, going from 68.7% success rate versus man to 72.8% success rate versus man. He's clearing that threshold. And man, Matt, I got to be honest with you. He not just cleared it, I mean, that's a big time jump. Can you talk about, just from a historical perspective, we don't really see those kinds of jumps that often. This was a very clear, to me, old school third year breakout from a skills perspective for George Pickens.
Yeah, there are some guys that have that like incremental growth. I actually think his journey is a little comparable to a guy like DJ Moore or like Kenny Galladay. These guys that were not good performers in like year one from a reception perception standpoint, but kind of had that like incremental, hey, just got better and better. Like that does happen. You know, that's why you don't just like completely write off guys in rookie seasons when they have like one good mark. And like that, honestly, that is enough. If you're a rookie in reception perception and you have like a look at Pickens, like sub average, not terrible, but like below average success rate versus man, and then pretty poor success rate versus zone. But you got that really strong press coverage score, especially if you're going to be an X receiver. Like you don't just throw in the towel on that player. Like you can highlight the concerns, and at the time we did highlight the concerns. Sure. But there are also guys, like again, especially when you go back to his prospect profile, like this is a guy who could get open. Like that was another thing with Pickens too, where it's like you can't completely throw in the towel on this player because I really liked his ability to separate, again, mostly against press man coverage as a prospect, especially in some of those X receiver ways. And what I've just been waiting to see from him was the separation in the short area, you know, because we know he can get open. He's always been really good on nines, corners, out routes, stuff like that. Right. Those big outbreaking routes to the sideline, even when he's working in condensed space, because he's that mostly, especially in Matt Canada's offense, it's just all the way out there on the boundary. Like, you know, you're not working with a lot of condensed formations and stuff like that. So when these like tight spaces, he was still pretty good at like separating there. And him and Justin Fields actually had some pretty good connections. Russell Wilson too, to his credit, had some good connections with him on those routes, but there was meat left on the bone on like these slants and curls where just like you, again, look at Dak Prescott, like I said, was the most productive passer in the NFL in 2023 on slants and shallow crossing routes. And like he was the MVP that year. Like you pile up a lot of production on those routes, even if they're not like the sexy highlight reel plays. That's how you just move an offense, matriculate it down the field. The number two, or I actually led the league in passing yards on those routes per game that year was Brock Purdy. Like we're talking about two of the more productive quarterbacks in the NFL on these slants and shallow crossing routes. Again, it's not the highlight reel stuff, but it's how you just incrementally improve, matriculate the ball down the field. I think Pickens is one of these guys that has taken the steps year by year to be like an improving player. So really like what I saw from him there. But you know, again, we're laying out a lot, and we'll finish this on a positive note because I have a really good like fun comparison for him, both from what I expect this season and also a reception perception historical perspective for Pickens. But before we get to that, before we end on a positive note, let's at least talk about some of the concerns with the player.
I mean, the bottom line is you can't look at his zone scores, Matt, and say, okay, well, what the hell is going on here? You know, I'm extolling the fact that he goes from 68% to nearly 73%, a 5% increase almost in his success rate versus man, which, by the way, you go back and look, Matt, there's just not a lot of guys that do that, man. I mean, again, we talk about incremental, maybe a percentage point here or there. It's just, it's rare to see a 5% jump in RP from a historical perspective. It just doesn't happen that often. So good on him. On him. But the zone scores, my God. I mean, again, we want to get to 80%, Matt. He's below 75%. Last year in 2024, 73.9% success rate versus zone coverage. 19th percentile. I get it. These X receivers, they're going to have lower success rates against zone coverage because of the types of routes that they run. But you can't be this low. That is a I don't want to say shocking number, but man, certainly an area for concern for George Pickens.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's a career best mark for Pickens, but it is still a 19th percentile mark, you know. Career best. Oh, 19th percentile. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it that number one, when we're looking at these X receivers, it's important to note that these guys are always going to be lower success rate versus zone players just by nature of the routes that they are running, by the nature of it's just harder to beat zone coverage when you're strictly working on the perimeter. And Pickens is one of these like 80-80 players, 80% outside, 80% on the line of scrimmage. Right. It's tough to be a good, consistent zone beater, especially when you're running a vertical route tree like George Pickens is. And, you know, you look at like the slants and curls. I'm talking about he was good on those routes. They didn't have him running those routes very often. He was running his most commonly run routes are 9 corner out and dig, and he's actually never been good on dig routes, which is again why I thought he was kind of a weird fit with Arthur Smith as the X receiver there. Right, but he's not going to do a lot of that in Dallas again. So that's pretty. It's gonna be a little more straight line stuff, which is fine. But yeah, that zone number is always gonna be a little bit lower. you would like it to be a little higher if he's going to be like a true number one receiver. But that again comes back to like why I think in Dallas this is a little less important because they have an alpha, right? They have a guy in CeeDee Lamb that you build the plane out of, you run everything through. So that zone coverage number matters a little bit less, but it is still like when we're sitting there ranking George Pickens among NFL receivers, the fact that he is, and by the way, like some of this zone coverage stuff, it's his fault. Okay. Like when you watch him like just straight up loaf through some of these plays and stuff like that, it's usually against zone coverage when he's not the primary read. Right. And again, like that's fine. You can say, well, he's not the number one. He's not the read. He's not this, and the other. It's like, okay, well, he might be. Like say quarterback goes into creation mode and all of a sudden you're just, that defender's in your hip pocket when you're running that crossing route against zone coverage. That's on you. That's your fault. And also another point to note about Pickens is while he's kind of framed as this dominant contested catch receiver, because at times he's been that, he was like below average in contested catch last year. And I think some of that is, again, just, some contested catch numbers can be fluky. Yeah. But they're fluid for sure. They're fluid. They're not as consistent, certainly, as the success rates against man and press and stuff like that, even zone coverage. But nevertheless, it's just, that's got to be, kind of something that he is fully dialed in on if he's going to hit his ceiling in Dallas. But yeah, that's the biggest concern with me is just the consistency from him, like game to game, drive to drive, really. And I think that shows itself out in the success rate versus zone coverage.
I will say this too, the loafing, it's hard. It's like hard to like quantify this, right? But tell me a dominant number one receiver that was loafing on a bunch of plays. You won't find it. Yeah. You just won't find it. No. Right. And it's like, and why is that? Because there's a certain level of professionalism. You got to set the tone. If you're going to be if you're going to be a dominant number one option, a dominant number one wide receiver on your team, you got to set the tone. You got to set that tone, baby. And far too often, and first of all, we were going through this too. It's like earlier in the season, by the way, like George Pickens is getting taken off of run plays. Right. And it's like, well, why is that? It's because he's loafing through some of the run blocking stuff. Right. Yeah. So it's like, all right. I mean, again, you want to be the dominant number one. Well, listen, you got to go out there and you got to perform each and every snap. You got to set the tone. George Pickens, I think, has a problem with that at times. We'll see if the culture in Dallas will breed a different George Pickens. I think it may. So he may build upon the growth that he saw from year two to year one to year two to year two to year three. I think he may build upon that here in year four in Dallas. Because again, I'll tell you what, you talk about the best quarterback that he's ever played with in Dak. I promise you, Dak is not going to let this guy off the hook, man. Like Dak's not going to be like, yo, that's okay. No, that's not going to happen. Right. So I think it'll be a little bit of a different culture for him going from Pittsburgh to Dallas as well. I do think that we will see another step forward in the game and in the progression of George Pickens. And by the way, why not? Because, man, we're talking contract time now, right? Yep. We're in contract time now. So if obviously that argument didn't work for his former teammate in Deontay Johnson, I think this time it'll work. No, I think this time it'll work. I think George Pickens will take a step forward. All right, give me that player comp that you were teasing here.
Okay, yeah. I mean, certainly, by the way, we're betting against history if we're saying like this Steelers receiver is going to leave here and then have more success in another spot. Doesn't happen very often. Like Emmanuel Sanders is probably the exception to the rule. We'll see if Pickens can add to the list here. Yeah, okay. But yeah, I love your analysis about Pickens, and I think this is why he, at this point, what we've seen from him so far, you can't call him like a number one receiver because you can't like set your watch by this guy. Like you can't, and that's what a number one receiver is. You set your watch to him because you're going to funnel the offense to him because you can consistently count on him. And Pickens, like just kind of marches to the beat of his own drum, and like, listen, if you're the number one receiver, you're drumming, we're in the line and we're all following you. And like Pickens hasn't been that guy, but that's why I think he actually could be a really, really good number two receiver in Dallas. And that brings me to my player comparison because like if everything works out for Pickens in Dallas, why can't he just be T. Higgins? Like what T. Higgins is for the Bengals, why can't Pickens be that for the Cowboys? Like we're talking about a guy that maybe could be a 1 on a team, but is an awesome number 2.
Yeah.
And is a guy that can play X receiver and allow the number 1 Chase in Cincinnati, CeeDee Lamb in Dallas to move around the formation and become truly maximized as a guy that, hey, like, look, CeeDee Lamb could go out and play X receiver on every snap and be really good. Jamar Chase could go out and play X receiver on every snap and be awesome. But, you really weaponize them by moving them around. And then you look at T. Higgins, 2024 reception perception, 72.4% success rate versus man, 74.8% against zone, 78.6 against press. Like we talked about with Pickens, not like the most consistent zone separator, but it doesn't really matter because he's playing X and he's winning against press man coverage. Yeah. And then you compare that to Pickens' 2024 data, 72.8 against man, 73.9 against zone, 77.6 against press. Like, they're within shouting distance of each other just as players. And I think from a statistical perspective, they're not really similar, but maybe they will be after this season if everything clicks in Dallas.